Be'ezer Hashem, we'll talk a little bit about this Parsha, Noach, Parshas Noach, and a little bit from the Zohar in this Parsha. So over the years, we've talked about the first part of Parshas Noach, which is more about the flood itself and the transformation that occurs through the flood, through the 40 days, represents the 40, and what Noach is, and what the dimensions of the Teva represent, and how it's the balance between giving and receiving, the name of Hashem, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the name of Aleph Daled and Yud. Also connected to the snake, Nun Ches Shin. Nun is the 50, and the Shin is the 300, which is the length and the width of the Teva. But today we'll focus a little bit on the end of the Parsha, which gets a little bit less attention, which is the story of the Haflagah, the story of the Tower of Babel. And to read a little bit from the Zohar, to understand a little bit the depth of what the Zohar understands, and it gives an understanding of what occurred, because it's a very mysterious story. It doesn't clearly say in the Torah what exactly was the problem. It's not so clear what is the issue. So to understand a little bit what is the issue, what are we talking about? What's the issue of why is it such a terrible thing? What was the problem about it? And what's the what can we learn from it? So it's interesting, before we begin, that the students of the Ramban, or not really the students of the Ramban, they're really the students of the Rashba. But the Ramban is the one that brought to the forefront, he brought a lot of the Kabbalistic, a lot of the spiritual, the side of the Torah, the secrets of the Torah. He was the one that revealed them in Spain. And one of the Ramban's primary students was the Rashba, the Ramban's Rebbe himself. The Ramban's teachers was Azriel and Azaria and Yitzchak the Saginar, which was Yitzchak Saginar of Provence, the son of the Ravid. And the primary student of the Ramban was the Rashba, who was also the Rav, and he was a famous banker and a very wealthy person. And he was a Dayan. He was a leader, the Gadol Yisrael in that generation. So the Rashba had students, and amongst the Rashba students, the Rashba writes a little bit about Kabbalah, very little bit, sometimes in his Haggadah, in his commentaries on Haggadah, in Talmud, in the Gemara. But his students, which are considered the students of the Ramban in terms of the Torah of the Ramban, the teachings of the Ramban. So the students of the Ramban, let's say, for example, Rabbeinu Bechaya, who was Spanish, or Reb Nachum Mercanti, who's Italian, or Reb Shem Tov Ibn Gaon, who is also Spanish, the author of the Migdal Oz and the Rambam, and also wrote a book on Kabbalah called Kesef Shem Tov, or Bishua Ibn Shov, which is also a student of the Rashba, Spanish, or Yitzchak Dvinako, which is from Eretz Yisrael, from Israel, in his book Emir Sinayim. A lot of the students of the Rashba, the teachings of the Ramban, write that the issue of the story of the Tower of Babel, of the Haflagah, was that they separated, and they said there are two forces in the universe. The Shtei Rishuyos, there's two powers in the world. They separated the two powers in the world. So that's the concept. That's the construct. So just very quickly, what's the story? The story itself doesn't really tell us what's going on, because the story just says that the people of the world gathered together in Babel, somewhere in modern day Iraq, somewhere in that area, Mesopotamia, and they gathered in that area, and they said, "Let us create a name for ourselves," and they built a great tower. And this doesn't seem to be anything wrong about this up until this point. And then it says that Hashem saw what was going on, and Hashem said that nothing can stop these people. So Hashem descended, whatever this means in the metaphorical level. Hashem descended to see what's going on, and Hashem created. First, they had this one language, and Hashem created. They have multiple languages, and the people dispersed and dispersed throughout the world. What exactly is the sin? What is this transgression? What was the problem of this generation? The Torah actually doesn't clearly delineate. Does not clearly tell us. So let's see what the Zohar says, and we'll try to tease out some deeper meaning based on the premise which we're following, which is the idea of Shtei Rishuyos. There are two forces in the universe. So Pasuk Reb Chia v'Amar. Reb Chia, this is the way the Zohar ends. The end of Parshas Noach, the end of Parsha, of the portion of Noach. This is the way the Zohar writes about the story. Pasuk Reb Chia v'Amar. Reb Chia opens and said. So he's revealing a new thing. It says that Hashem says, indeed, these are one people, one with one language, and therefore I'm going to disperse them throughout the world. To chazi, maksiv, come and see. Not listen, but come and see. See what should we see? It says that when they traveled from Kedem, what is Kedem? What is the place of Kedem? Kedem, the Zohar says, mikadmoine shalolim, which means they separate themselves from Kedem, means the original, the origin. They separate themselves from the origin of the world, which means from the Creator, from the place of Yichud, the place of unity. They separate themselves from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from Hashem. That's the Kadmon Shalom. Then it says Vayimtzu. It says Vayimtzu because if they found the plain or the valley, and this is where they said they were going to create this tremendous tower. So the language of the Torah is Vayimtzu. It says that they found. It should have said Vayiru b'bayalei. The Torah should have said that they saw this is a place that is good for a big structure. If they're going to build this great structure, and some of the ancient Mesopotamian people created these large buildings with steps, that they were these large towers of steps representing power. So they saw that it was a good location. So it should have said that they saw that this was the right location to build this tower. But it doesn't say this. It says Vayimtzo. They found this place. My Vayimtzo. What does it mean that they found? What this means was that they found in that place, they found a mitzvah, they found a finding, which was hidden from the secrets from the earlier generation, which was hidden by the earlier generations. What exactly does this mean? Again, it's not clear what the Zohar is saying, but they found a secret. They found a wisdom, a chachma, bekadmai. They found a wisdom in this place. They discovered a wisdom. And it says, with this wisdom, what they wished to do, with the wisdom that they found, what they uncovered, they wished to separate themselves from the will of the Creator, from the will of Hashem, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they spoke about it through language, which we'll see is very important. This whole idea of the emergence of language. Language is the way we contextualize the world. This is the beginning of the Torah. It talks a lot about language. Hashem creates through words, through language. The whole idea of a teva, literally the ark, certainly the way the Baal Shem Tov reads it, is that a teva is, teva means that it's an ark, but it's also a word. It's all about language. So they used their language and they did their actions. Continues the Zohar and says, Chame Maksiv. Let's come and see, what does it say? Am echa v'sachva echa l'kulam. That there were one people with one language. Begin de'inu b'liba chad v'rusa chadam ala b'lashon kodesh. Because they had one language, one desire, and they spoke in one sacred language. Therefore the Zohar says, therefore the Torah says, now it's impossible for us to stop what they're going to do. There's nothing that can stop them because they are speaking one language as one people with one heart, and they're unified. There's nothing to stop them. And therefore, so Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, what should I do? Kaviyachol. As if that this is what could I do? So it says, I will mix the higher levels, and then I will mix up their lower language. And therefore they'll stop doing what they're doing. So it continues the Zohar and says like this: Man begin to have a since it says that they were with one heart, with one soul, with one spirit, with one heart, and they spoke the sacred language. Therefore, Dina de la'ela liyachal l'shaltabain. Therefore, there was no din, there was no judgment, there's no harshness that can affect them because they were in a state of unity. The Gemara also mentions this, the idea that because they were unified. It says they were unified people, so nothing could take sway over them. No negative forces can take sway over them. So the Zohar continues, says, certainly us, that we study Torah. Certainly when we study Torah and we're with one heart, with one love, with one desire towards other people, and we have the sense of unity with others, certainly nothing can have an effect on us. Therefore, the Zohar says, now this is a moral lesson. We should know that anytime there's arguments, anytime there's separation, there won't be any lasting permanence. Something that doesn't have a sense of unity, and there's no unity there, but there's argumentation and dissension, will not have an existence. So therefore, that generation, even though there was a rebellion against the Creator, against the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the din, the judgment of above, did not affect them. Once they already separated from each other, and there was already dissension, and there was arguments, then already they lost their power, and then they were able to disperse throughout the world. Says the Zohar, continues the Zohar, completes the Zohar. Therefore, that says, therefore we know from this, the kula b'milah de pumatalia, that everything is dependent on the mouth, that language, that the importance of language, the way we language things, the way we define things, the way we contextualize things is most important. Because it says, kiven is Babel, once the language was amiss, once there was no correct communication, immediately then they were able to disperse throughout the world. So the language was created the unit. But then it says in the future world, in the world to come in times of Mashiach, what will happen? Ki uz, for then, which also means in the past and in the future. Then they will reach all the nations of the world. The verse says in Zephaniah, the prophet says that then all the languages of the world will return into a safa brura, into a clear language, a perfect language, a sacred, perfect language. They will call out to the oneness of Hashem, and they will serve the one. And then it says, then Hashem will be one, and His name will be one. The moment that man will speak the language of unity and speak the language of oneness and the recognition of the oneness of Hashem, that's when Hashem will be one. So it's the language that creates the reality. The language of things actually creates the reality. Once we speak about this, that's the way it becomes. So what does the Zohar say? Let's try to unpack this. What is actually the problem of the Haflagah? What do they want? And what was the issue here? What was the big issue? So it seems like they found something. They found a certain wisdom, from an earlier wisdom, and they took this wisdom, and because of that wisdom, they separated themselves from the Creator, from Hashem. What does this mean? The generation of the Tower of Babel, the generation of the Haflagah, which the Torah describes in the end of Parsha, this week's Parsha. This is a generation that remembers, still living with the recent memory of this great catastrophic event called the flood. The great Babel, which is the Babel, which incidentally is recorded in all world history. Many of the ancient texts or inscriptions or stelas that we have from the ancient times speak about a flood that immersed the entire world. The story of Gilgamesh and another text. But there was a major event in world history, in the history of the human development. And the story of the flood is essentially that the story of the flood is like a recreation of the first story of creation. There's a creation of the story. The world was created. And the way the story describes the creation of the world is that the world in its inception, the universe in its inception, is covered by water. It's almost like the primordial state of the universe is that it's covered by water. And then the water recedes, right? Literally the pasuk opens up in the second, third pasuk of the Torah, is that there's a ruach elikim rachefes al panei hamayim. There's the spirit of God of Hashem is hovering over the water, and the water is covering the entire earth. And then there's the emergence of earth, and the separation. The water recedes, and then the land mass becomes revealed. This concept represents the movement from chaos to order. And this is a similar pattern that happens later with Moshe Rabbeinu, where Moshe Rabbeinu is Kiromai Mishasu, he's pulled out of the water and he becomes the man of law, the person of order, the person that gives us the Torah of order, of structure. So he goes from water into land. The idea is that there are two currents. There's a primordial current within the universe, which is the chaotic. There's a chaotic state, an unbridled state, or to say differently, it's like the erev, the night, where everything is mixed and there's no clarity, there's no distinction. And then there's the emergence of day, of light. There's vayi erev, vayi boker. There's light, and then there's day. There's the emergence of structure, of order, where we can actually use language, and this is where language comes in, because language defines things. What does language do? Language says, this is a table, this is a chair. When things are in the dark, which also represents in a state of a mystery, or a state of erev, which also means that something that's mixed up, that it's urav, it's mixed, and it's unclear, or ibur, or like an impregnated state. It's not in a state of clarity. In the state of water, it's still in this water state, and then it emerges into a more structured world. So there's the chaos, and the structure emerges from that. The story of Parshas Noach is that the world loses its sense. The way people act, is that Mal Aretz Chamas. The world is filled with Chamas. And we spoke about it many times. What the idea of Chamas, which is extra testosterone and this awash with water energy, and therefore the effects of that is that the world becomes overflooded with water. It becomes drowned out with water, and then the water recedes again. The same image like in the creation story, but this is creation, so to speak, step 2 or version 2. And which is the story of Noach. And Noach emerges from the place of this water emergence, from the place of this the world is immersed in water, and he's moving into the place of land. Symbolically, not to get in full details, this is also the difference between the two birds that he sends out, which I've spoken about in the past. The idea of the two birds: one represents the erev, which is the raven, which is generally the archetypical idea of a raven is the dark raven, and what feeds on carcasses and necrophilia and does all these strange things, but it represents like the force of darkness, like the raven, and in popular culture as well, and in world history, the raven, and even in the Torah, the raven is considered the one that is ejected out of the teva because he has relationships, like the 3 that the Torah says, the Chazal say in the Gemara Sanhedrin, that have relationships in the teva. There's like this predator type of character, the darkness, and then there is also the dove. The dove represents the light, and it represents the Yonasi Tamasi, represents in the Shir Hashirim, it represents commitment, and it represents clarity, and it represents order and structure. That's the white. That's the Erev and Boiker. That's like the light and the darkness and the light. So there's this emergence from this world, and not to get fully into this, but let's go back into the Haflagah. What is the generation of the Haflagah? So Haflagah, the generation of the Haflagah, the generation of the Tower of Babel, know their recent past, and they are very much aware of the history of the human race up until this point, and they just want order. They want structure. They want to create some type of harmonious, civilized society, which all sounds great, and it is good on some level. But what they wanted was, they wanted to understand the world, or they perceive the world, and this is what they wanted to achieve, this idea, was that they're shtei reshuyos. They weren't denying the existence of a transcendence, of a creator, of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't say that. That's not what the idea was. It wasn't Avodah Zarah, but it was Shittuf, or the idea of Shtei Reshuyos. There are two forces. Like there's the force of light, the force of darkness, which is later in the Zoroastrians, what Chazal talk about. This Yetzirah v'Cheshach, there's two ideas of light and darkness. But they wanted to separate, and in their mind, here it's a flip, it's the reverse image. The idea was, let's create a society which is predicated, and this is what it says, that they found, the Zohar says they found the wisdom. What was the wisdom that they found? So there are two wisdoms in this world, so to speak. There's the upper wisdom, the transcendent wisdom, the Torah. There's the world of spirituality, the ruchnius, the metaphysical, the higher realms, the spiritual blueprint of creation. And then there's the lower realms of wisdom, which is the natural sciences. As much as they understood science, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. That's complicated, because how could they build this tremendous tower? Maybe it was found, it was lost. But as much as they understood the nature of this world, so what they were trying to create was, they found the lower wisdom. The Chachmasim Mekadmai, they found this lower wisdom, which is the what we'll call it, let's say, the sciences of that time, or the natural order of their way of their understanding, and the paradigm of the way they understood in that period of time. And they said, let's create a society that, forget about anything that's spiritual, anything that's ruch and higher and transcendent. Let's just create an homogeneous, harmonious society predicated on our natural understanding of the structure of the universe. There's a certain sense, like I said before, there's a certain sense of order within this world and a certain sense of chaos within this world. Let's go into the world of order. The way on a very deep understanding of the way we understand the world, the way we can even perceive and do science or contemplate what's going on in the world, is from an innate understanding that there's structure. If I understand that the structure, and I understand that the structure, there's order and certain type of hierarchy or structure within my own world, then I can see that in the world outside of me. If I didn't have this innate understanding of order within my own state of my own consciousness, I wouldn't be able to observe in the outside world, which is really a reflection of my inside world, the same type of order. So structure is an inherent part of creation as well. When there's the emergence of landmass, which is the idea of structure, and structure is language. Language gives structure. What does language do? Language defines things. Language says this is a table and this is a chair. Or when people are communicating, and I want to tell you that, well, let's build something together. If I say one, you say two. That's the way we can do things. The same thing also is all creativity. All human development in the sciences, all human development of natural wisdom only comes because one person says one, the other person says two, and then you do 1 + 2, and then you have 3, and it evolves this way. So once there is communication and language that helps to articulate, to unfold, or to reveal more of the natural sciences and the natural wisdom of the world. So again, what is the Haflagah? What do they want? They said, we're tired of this lack of structure, or we're tired from the chaos that was going on in the times of the flood, and the times that brought about the flood, where it was just Mal'aretz Chamas, the world is filled with theft and filled with promiscuity and lack of boundaries. We're going to create a very structured, harmonious world. Based on what? Based on, forget about spirituality, we're just going to do this on a physical way. And this is reminiscent, of course, we're talking about in the 21st century, Tafshin Pehei, this idea, it sounds very reminiscent of what we'll call modern Western civilization, which is, how can we create a just and order world without God? I don't know if this was originally this plan, but this is certainly since the Enlightenment, this is the idea of how do we create. Man understands that there is natural law, and Kantian ethics, which is like, don't do unto me, I would not do to you what you don't want me to do I wouldn't do to you something which you would do for me. So I wouldn't steal from you because I don't want you to steal from me. So, reminiscent of the idea of what Hillel says in the famous Gemara in Shabbos, which is, don't do unto another what you don't want to do unto yourself. So there's some type of consensus. There's a consensus of how we're going to create a civilized world, how we're going to create an orderly, structured universe, is through a shared language, and which means a shared valued system, and a shared understanding of the structure of how the universe works based on our natural understandings of the universe. This is what they wanted. Says the Zohar. Because they were a very unified people, and they represent a state of harmony within each other, even though it's devoid of spirituality, even though it's devoid of transcendence, this society is an offense to Kavanas Abriya, to the intention of the creation, because the intention of creation is not just to l'sheves yitzar, not only to settle this world in a civilized way, which is that's the foundation of the creation, but ultimately to reveal divinity and transcendence within this world, to bring the world to a higher state, will ultimately erode itself, and will ultimately implode, because what you're creating is a world that is bereft of divine, bereft of God, and bereft and empty of all essential meaning and purpose. The purpose becomes within itself. There's nothing inherently higher in the creation. This is the story in itself. There's no lower wisdom that's seeking transcendence to connect with something that's higher. It's the thing in itself, and the thing in itself erodes because people have a spiritual dimension to themselves. Every person is born with its Tzelem Elokim. Every person has some type of strive for spirituality, and if you're not going to give people a sense of morality that's based on something that's transcendence, or even a sense of connection through prayer, through davening, through transcendence, something that's connected to something that's higher, a higher she'ifa, a higher desire of connectivity, and you're only telling people that this is the world, this is it, and there's nothing higher, and this is the Chachmat Hatah, this is the lower wisdom, this is what it is, what people are going to do is they're going to start creating all types of strange rituals and belief systems, or conspiracy systems, because when you stop believing in the one thing, you start believing in everything. And when you don't have spiritual rituals that are meaningful and purposeful and divine and transcendent, then you start creating silly rituals that also seem to be absolutes. You start believing in the superficiality of things. You start identifying yourself with the superficiality of things because that's your sense of identity. So it's a people that identify with slogans or with silly rituals. If you look around the world, not to just give a critique of the world, but if you look around the world today, you see a lot of this going on. People are, during the coronavirus and certain things, there were certain things that we knew that scientifically these things don't work, and yet people held on to these things because people are starving for rituals. Like if this particular mask that didn't work, people were still wearing them because it wasn't really the good ones. It was because that was an identity. Or people today that demonstrate or scream slogans that they actually, there's no inner work that's created. It's all about some type of external, because people are grasping to hold on to something. There's no ruchnius, there's no real spirituality, there's no connection to the divine, there's no connection to Hashem. And that's what happens. You're not allowing people to be themselves, to really be spiritually connected. And this is the sadness of the story. And this is what the Torah is actually describing in the story of the Tower of Babel, which is this beautiful, theoretically beautiful, utopian, democratic, open universe where there's harmony and love between each other, and people share a certain value and a certain ethics and a certain civility and a language that's common, and yet it erodes and it's rotten to its core because there is no divine. There is no higher spirituality. The Zohar says actually that in itself protects itself, and that's why it survives for a long period of time, because at least there's some type of civility within that society and some type of unity. But eventually it actually implodes within itself, and it causes a tremendous havoc and tremendous devastation. And this is what the Torah says. So what the way the Torah describes this is Hashem says, I'm going to, which is very interesting what the Zohar says, I'm going to, there's a certain inherent structure, and therefore people are connecting to the structure, to the certain civility, the certain way and order of the universe. Hashem says, I'm going to disrupt the metaphysical order of the universe in order for people to not be able to hold on to this false illusionary structure that they have that is not connected to something that's transcendent. And what will happen then, because the spiritual, the metaphysical structure will fall apart. Kaviyachol, the Zohar says, and the way the Ramak and others learned this piece of Zohar, it means that the fire will be, the munal of fire, like the divine, the energy of fire will be put into water. Water be into fire, which means that Hashem says, you are believing in the inherent structure of the universe, and therefore you believe in the science that's bereft and separated and devoid of divinity, devoid of spirituality, devoid of something that's transcendent. Hashem says, I'm going to uproot that truth as well, and therefore you're not going to have anything to hold on to. I'm going to I'm going to destroy that higher dimension as well, and therefore you're going to lose that structure. And therefore, therefore you're going to have different languages, you're going to have different expressions. And what's the tachlis? So what is the end? That people were dispersed throughout the creation. But the ultimate, the Messianic vision, and this is the way the Zohar completes, is really that there has to be a marriage. It's not really a marriage because it's really essentially one, but the understanding of the unity of not just the separation of the unity below, separated from the unity above, the separation of worldly wisdom or the natural wisdom or the scientific wisdom, separate from the spiritual wisdom of the above, and therefore in the Haflagah, the generation of the Tower of Babel, they wanted to separate it completely and base a society only predicated and founded on natural law and scientific knowledge. Ultimately, the way forward as a civilization, as a people, and this is what the Torah is telling us, is that there should be unity for something that's transcendent. The desire to create something, to be connected to something that's transcendent. The way forward, and ultimately the way to the Messianic time and the Mashiach time and the revealing of Mashiach, of the name of Hashem will be one and His name will be one, is to live in a place of harmony, of course, and a place of unity, but a place that's unity that's predicated based on a spiritual understanding that there's a Hashem that's one, and our she'ifos, our desire is always to connect to something that's transcendent. So yes, there's a understanding of the scientific and the natural law of order, but this comes from a higher level of order, higher level of unity, which is the connection to the divine. And ultimately, this is really a lesson or understanding in our own personal lives and our own collective life of what it really means to live in a place of structure and order, with always continuously live in that place of structure and order and civility, with a she'ifa, with a constant desire to connect to something that's transcendent, to recognize that the order of the universe, the order of the structured universe, and the scientific understanding of the world is not something that's separate. The lower wisdom is not separate from the higher wisdom. The lower wisdom is a manifestation of that higher wisdom. And every time we understand something deeper about the world, it has to give us a deeper appreciation for the oneness of Hashem. And the more we recognize the oneness of Hashem within everything, that's the way we're going to come to a place where indeed it'll be revealed, like the Zohar completes the Zohar and Noach In that day, V'hoya Hashem l'melech, Hashem will be the reign over the world. A color, it's in the entire world. The recognition of the oneness of Hashem by Yom Yiyah, and that day, speedily and immediately, Hashem Echad, Yiyah, Hashem Echad, Shema Echad, the name of Hashem, and Hashem will be one. The divine self and the expression of self will all be one and the same. Have a wonderful Shabbos.